Welcome back, everyone. I'm Massimo Rigatti, and this is the Sober Method Podcast. Today, I'm sitting down with Daryl Dittmer, entrepreneur, life mastery coach, author of When I Stop Fighting and When You Stop Fighting, and the man behind the Show Up podcast. After a rough start that landed him in treatment at 19, Daryl has lived nearly 4 decades of sobriety by choosing personal responsibility, daily discipline, and showing up even when it's uncomfortable. We're going to talk about what real confidence looks like when the pressure never lets up. Daryl, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Massimo. I really appreciate you having me.
We're really glad that you're here. So, Daryl, you've been sober for almost 40 years, and that is a lifetime for most people in recovery. Could you walk us back to the 19-year-old Daryl in treatment, and what was the moment you realized fighting yourself was the real problem?
Yeah, it's interesting. I like to go back there because I never want to stop reminding myself, even though it's, such a long time later, but it's not as much about staying sober for me these days as it is just keeping myself straight, keeping myself on track, keeping myself moving in the direction that gives me the life that I want. And I think that's the most important thing to me about being in recovery. And I like to look at it these days as I've recovered, and it's up to me to continue to grow. So, so, just a little bit of background. I'll keep it short, but I grew up in a Midwestern blue collar family. My dad was a mechanic. My mom took care of us kids. My dad was a pretty tough dude, Korean War veteran, and just he just grew up with that sort of ethos of toughness, and it was just how I grew up. I didn't know any other way. And the interesting thing was my mom was probably a little bit tougher than him based on the fact that she had some life experiences that were really difficult. And so she came from a little different place than my dad, but she could be tough. And so, just a quick little, I guess, illustration of my dad was, he when I think I was either 13 or 14 years old, and work ethic was kind of the thing that they, professed and pushed and all that sort of stuff. Take care of yourself, your own responsibility, all that kind of stuff. And which was great. It wasn't great when I was young, but it's great now that I've gotten a little bit older and I understand the value of these things. So my dad put me in front of a farmer after church, and this was after we moved out to the country, and he said to the farmer, "Can you put him to work?" And the farmer put me to work, and it was like $1.25 or $1.50 an hour or something, and I was thrilled. I had no idea what I could be making, what I should be making. I'm just a kid, and so, the great thing was it was long hours, 10, 12, and we even did some 14-hour days. And so, that $1.25, $1.50, whatever it was, really added up. I was like, wow, man, I got some money in my pocket. Anyway, and I'll get into the drinking and drugs here in a second, but my dad, he was a tough dude, as I said, and I went to him one day because I was wearing tennis shoes. That's what we call them in the Midwest. I think call them sneakers everywhere else in the world, but we call them tennis shoes. I never played tennis, but we call them tennis shoes. Anyway, um, so I've got these tennis shoes that I'm using for the farm work, and the problem is, they as the cow and pig manure sort of drills its way through them and just destroys the fabric. And we couldn't wear leather shoes or anything like that, so it's destroying the fabric. I come home every single day with just covered in this stuff, but it's all over my feet. My socks are soaked, and it's kind of disgusting. But I said to my dad, I'm like, "Hey dad, can I get some work boots?" And I'm 15 years old. He's like, "Well, yeah, of course you can. You're working. Go buy yourself some." I was like, "Oh, all right. That's cool." So that was the environment. which wasn't a bad environment. It was just, there was toughness that needed to be, you needed to have a toughness to be in the family and to get along in the family. And so anyway, I started drinking and drugging at 13, and it escalated. It escalated pretty quickly because I loved it. It's all I wanted to do. It was a way for me to feel less pressure, less angst, less insecurity. And that was really what it was about. And I didn't necessarily know that then. All I knew was that's what I wanted to do. And so I kept doing it, and we got into harder drugs and lying and cheating and stealing and hiding and making excuses, and oh, I was here, when I was there, and I'm doing this when I'm doing that. And it became a situation where it was like my soul and my emotions were on a cheese grater. Somebody's just grating me, the me part, not my body, but everything inside of me. And it was very, it just tore me apart and ripped my soul apart. And to the point where there was an intervention done, and I'll keep it fairly short. There was an intervention done when I was still 18, and it was basically, to make a long story short, it was, look, get out of our life, or go talk to this social worker about your problem. And I've been caught many times throughout, but it was never got to be to this, situation with my family. Anyway, I decided that I was going to go talk to the counselor, and I also decided I was going to BS him to the best of my ability. And as soon as I walked in there, he's like, dude, don't trash talk, don't lie, don't, just don't, because I'm going to know, and I'm going to boot you out, and you're going to be in the same place you were before you came in. So at that time, I'm 18, and he intimidated me, and I'm supposed to trying to be this, tough dude, and I'm really not. I'm just a scared little kid, although I didn't know that for a while. And anyway, so at the end, the only thing I remember, well, two things. One is, after he said that to me, I was as honest as I could be with him at that time in my life, whatever that looked like. I remember I just tried to be honest with him. And number two, I said, at the end, I'm like, all right, doc, what do you think? And he's like, you got to get into treatment. Nah. And so anyway, I was scheduled for treatment, but in between when I was scheduled for treatment and when I went into treatment was December 31st of 1984, which was New Year's Eve. And I'm at this party, and I'm around, probably a couple hundred people, somewhere between 100 and 200. Some are my friends, some are not, people that I knew, et cetera, et cetera. And I was the most lonely and depressed and isolated, and just did not want to be on the planet anymore. And I thought that night, I'm like, you know what? I'm wonder if it's just better if I take myself out. And it hits me when I say it now. But that was the point that I was at, and 3 days later I went into drug and alcohol treatment. So I'll cut it there, Massimo, and I'll go further with
That,
anything you'd
that's
like.
that's quite a story. That is, but at the end of it, you made that choice. You made the choice to go and do something about it, which is really, in a way, inspirational that you made that choice at 19 to recognize that you had that challenge. So as you then go through treatment, and obviously you come out, you're sober, there had to be then a lot of discomfort in that period. Like, how did you push through? Because you didn't have the years behind you that so many of us do when we recognize I have a problem, and I might be in my 40s and recognizing I have a problem, and you have more life experience. How were you able to stitch together the strength in that early period?
That's a great point, Massimo, because one of the things that I talk about a lot is not only was I dealing with trying to be sober and get my life together, from that perspective, but I was 19 years old at that time. I didn't know how to live. I didn't know the first thing about anything. And because I'm just fresh out of, from 13 to 19, um, basically thwarting myself from an emotional growth perspective and any sort of spiritual growth or whatever I had, it was all gone. And what I was trying to do was, how do I have some confidence? How do I look people in the eye? How do I not feel so crappy all the time? And so those were the things that I was contending with, and I had to find a way of life, something that gave me an idea of what to do. And what I found in treatment, because they're hammering me in treatment, tell us how you feel, what have you been doing, where you been lying to yourself, self honesty, all that kind of stuff. None of it was anything I was familiar with. And so I couldn't just take that package and go out into my life and say, oh, I'm fine now. So they got me involved in the 12 steps when I was, in treatment, and I went to the meetings, and they said, you know what? Find meetings when you get out. And I don't remember if they helped me find them. Maybe they didn't, maybe they didn't, but I did find them. And what I found was in the 12 steps, and it was, I don't know how different was back then, but it became my roadmap for living. It became my roadmap for moving myself in a different direction. And and honestly, the discomfort of my life as a general theme, it waned a little bit over the years, but I mean, it probably took 5 years till I stopped thinking about drinking and drugs, and not all the time, but just that thought, like, oh, what if? And probably 7 to 10 years to really start to get a real thread of peace of mind and peace of heart and that sort of thing. And it got better and better over time, but it just, as a theme that was running through my life, almost on a daily basis. It definitely, it takes time, but the cool part is the journey. The cool part is not, because you never really get to the destination, you know,
No.
right? We're
No.
always doing this stuff. So
We're always in pursuit of something else, right? But I that's incredible. What you know how AA actually laid down that foundational work for you as an adult, and in a way shaped you who you became as an adult. That's really interesting and to me. So, do you have any sense at all why you were able to make that change? Or, I mean, how were you? I guess where's the why in all of that? Do you have any sense of why you were able to make it at that point?
I do, and I believe it's a fairly common thread of people who decide that they're going to change is they've had enough. And it doesn't matter what age that is. It could be 12, it could be 20, it could be 70, it could be whatever. But it's sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's how it was framed back then. Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? And are you willing, so given that as the backdrop, if that's not the backdrop, nothing good is going to happen probably in terms of the work, because I wouldn't be taking the work seriously enough if I wasn't sick and tired of being sick and tired. So that's what bolsters the commitment, and that's what allowed me to sort of immerse myself in this new life to the best of my ability.
That's awesome. You talked earlier about doing the right thing and doing the right thing the first time, every time. What does that mindset look like in practice in your world today?
It's indispensable because really what that is me being honest with myself and saying, here's where you might be off, here's where you can correct, here's maybe something that you can do differently that's going to either, benefit me or benefit someone I care about or humanity. I mean, if I'm just being an idiot, I got to change. So and I know I say that somewhat in jest, but not really, because I'm capable I have that personality. I have that addictive personality. I have that complete immersion personality. I have that don't quit personality, and that can be a wonderful thing. But doing the right thing means I can't do it all just for the benefit of me without thinking about other people and the rest of the world and my own, internal mechanisms and growth. Um, it's absolutely crucial. So doing the right thing comes up every single day and always have choices every single day. But I think the key for me now is that I get the messages and I've cleared away enough of the wreckage inside of me to the messages are pretty clear of what is the right thing in any given situation. And that's a far cry from how I used to live my life. So
And, and and what you're talking about there is really something that we both coach others about, which is consistency. And in your book, When You Stop Fighting, you talk about building your own path. And what mindset needs to be present for someone that is beginning to make progress? And how would you recommend that they get there? And for folks that are, trying to go deeper on these ideas, is DarylDittmer.com still the best hub for people for your books, life mastery coaching, or do you prefer people connect with you on social?
I think my website's probably the best place. And it's Daryl Dittmer, just like it's spelled down there.com. And you know, it's really what I try to do is I try to and it's not even necessarily it is a try thing, but sometimes it's an allow thing. I need to get myself out of the way because I'm the only one that's putting my grubby little fingers in my life and messing it up. Truly. I mean, and that is that's that's universally true, I believe. And
Yes.
that's a difficult thing to come to terms with, that how can I'll tell a quick story, and the reasons my books were titled the way that they were. When I first got into the 12 steps, I found a sponsor, and what I looked for, I didn't look for the guy with the latest, BMW. I didn't look for the guy that was making a ton of money. I looked for the guy, and since I'm a guy, I looked for a guy, which I think is very important. And so, especially in early sobriety. And so I looked for someone who was at peace. I looked for someone who was calm and steady, and I watched, and I found this guy who was, to me, head and shoulders above everyone else from those perspectives. And he was probably 15 years in at that point. He was in his 50s, I think mid to late 50s. His name was Bud. And so, my life was characterized by fighting and fighting life and fighting problems and fighting everything that came up. Fight it. Fight humans, fight whatever. And so as I was detailing my issues to Bud, he's like, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. And I'm like, oh, and that hit me like a ton of bricks, and it's been hitting me for 40 years because the fight that I have is with me. And once the fight with me wanes, my fight with the world goes away. It really does. And that is so incredibly important. And that is I'm a fan of building myself and building my mindset and building an inner strength that doesn't allow me to just flap around in the breeze. I don't just flap around in the breeze of life based on what
Mhm.
happens.
Yeah.
If I build myself as, I can't, and I had to learn this one. This is a big one for me because I can easily be an oak tree. I can be the one that stands there and like nothing's going to knock me down. And all of a sudden a big wind comes and I just break in half. And so I have to be like a reed. I have to be able to move a little bit with the breeze, but not break, and I can bend. And so that's what I build. And that's what I try to teach is that mindset that, just I have to build this and the rest of life happens the way it's supposed to.
Wow. Well, everything you just described, stopping the fight, building your own path, and doing the right thing consistently, believe it or not, it sounds a lot like the Stoic step in Sober Method.
Mm.
So, I mean, which is getting brutally honest with yourself, acknowledging what you can and can't control, doing the right thing the next time, no matter what. So, if you were to look at all of these principles that we just talked about, how did you apply that when it came to business as you began stepping out into that sober life and building what became a career as a business owner and an entrepreneur?
That was one of the scariest parts of my life, honestly, because I come from such a blue collar. Nobody in my family ever graduated from college, all that sort of stuff. And so when I was confronted with, okay, I'd like to have some more money than I grew up with, and I don't want to drink powdered milk anymore, like that sort of stuff. And that was horribly warm and disgusting. But anyway, I wanted to have a different life. So the only way that I knew to do it was to try to get involved in something else other than what I grew up doing. And so I did that. Somebody introduced me to sales and I was like, "You know what? I'll try it." And that was the first principle is I have to take some risks. I have to move into some things that I really don't want to do. And, but not and I've done plenty of silly things in my life that I didn't really want to do and I've gotten butchered in many of those instances. But those things that I know that are gonna be good for me and things that I know I have to move through to get to another place can be really scary, and I have to be able to summon the courage to do those things. And a hint on courage, which I think is a crucially vital component, is and I'm going to say I'm gonna bring God into the picture because and I'm a big fan of whatever you believe God is, whether it's energy or universe or the big dude with the beard up in the sky, whatever it is, I don't care. And it doesn't matter. My conception of God is what has made sense to me over time. And so I see people praying for strength and praying for courage. And what I envision is God saying, "You know what? I already gave you those things. Go use them." And that's truly what I believe about taking risks and doing things that we don't want to do. Is we have the strength. We don't need that step in between asking for it because we already have it. To me, that's a delay tactic. That's
Mm.
I heard a long time ago. Hope is another word for postpone. And
Yes, it is.
right? And so go do it. Take out that layer. Um, and so that was a big part for me was courage. And then it was just, being open to understanding that in so many cases, I just don't know anything. And especially about what's going to happen.
Oh, yes,
And so I have
exactly.
to just get on the path, and I have to do what's in front of me and continue to do what's in front of me and honor the process and how life just sort of continues to create itself along that process, and that's the most beautiful thing. It's not, yeah, I've made money, all that sort of stuff, but that's not the beautiful part. The beautiful part is going from where I started to where I am today, and I look forward to whatever's next. I hope that answered your question, Mas.
Oh, it totally did. So as you think about that, I mean, like everything you just told me, there were a lot of concepts in there about avoidance and fighting for yourself and hope and courage and everything. But if you could boil everything down to like one thing that you executed consistently, what would be the thing that you think compounded the most over time? You know, like you're paying off that debt for something. What little habit helped you succeed the most, do you think, in your life?
That's a great question because, there's 47 things that come to mind. But because I've tried so many things, to try to amplify the good parts of me, and but I'm gonna say that probably finding a way to be quiet was the most important thing that I've done over the course of time because and consistently over the course of time, and sometimes not consistently over the course of time, but for the last many, many years consistently. And that can be achieved in many different ways, but our minds can just, especially in the environment we live in now, in with social media, news, I mean, just insanity. So we can either dive into all that stuff and just have this thing whirling constantly, like, oh, this political thing or this religious thing or this news or this whatever. And it's like, you know what? You don't have to be there. You can take a break from that. And I learned to take a break from that stuff. And I've never been a news watcher.
Mhm.
Uh, I read some stuff on my phone every once in a while, but but we can take a break from that, and I've been fortunate to I found another mentor years ago who taught me meditation, and he also taught me breath work, and taking the time to be quiet allowed me to and this is gonna be fairly deep, I hope it's not too crazy, but allows me to make the unconscious messages conscious.
Yeah.
So I'm getting the messages. And if I'm whirling up here all the time and I'm all tumultuous in here, I'm not going to get the messages. So that was a key for me, finding quiet and I do it, I don't do anything 7 days a week because it'll just piss me off because I'm a defiant dude. I just am.
Maybe six, but you know.
Six for sure. You know, 5 definitely, well, I should say 5 definitely, 6 most likely, 7 absolutely not.
Yeah,
And that
yeah.
goes with working out, that goes with quiet time, it goes with everything because I wanna take that break so that and not that it's difficult to do, it's just I found the value of resting from everything at some point is important.
Yeah. Daryl, that was pure gold. I mean, that was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone, here's one sober move I want every high performer listening to take with you this week. So I want you to observe your own avoidance pattern today. The moment you feel the urge to numb, scroll, drift, or start fighting yourself again, and I want you to write that down into one sentence. And then step to the behavior step, replace it with a single minute of show up reset. I want you to stand up, breathe, tell yourself the truth about where you actually are and who you actually are in that moment. And then I want you to execute that reset 3 times tomorrow and measure it. Did you stay in command? Did you do the right thing the first time? And then in the restoration, if any of those actions have impacted anyone close to you, I want you to own it and apologize to them. So, Daryl, before we wrap up, one tradition that I'm starting on this show, and you're my first guest, every guest leaves a single sharp question for the next high performer who sits in your chair. What's the one question you'd ask the next guest about sobriety, confidence under pressure, showing up consistently, or building their own path?
Well, showing up is my credo. And so I would ask the next person that's going to be on your podcast, what is one thing that you haven't done that you know you need to do and you are going to execute in the next 3 days?
Mm, that's a great one. I like it. Well, it's locked in for the next guest. I can't wait to hear their answer.
I can't either.
Daryl, you get the final 30 seconds. Any wisdom you want to impart on all of our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that opportunity, Massimo. So my sponsor said to me, and as I was again reeling when I was younger, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know where to start, and I didn't know where to go next. He said, Daryl, just remember this. And this sounds biblical, but it's not. It's just great old wisdom. He said, first things first, which you see around the 12 step halls. But he said, after that, he said, and the rest will be added on. And that's really cool because if I take care of in here, number one, absolutely as much as possible, it's amazing how the rest of life just sort of happens around me, and I don't have to be caught up in all of the madness all the time. So first things first, and the rest will be added on, and find out what those first things first are for you.
Huh. I really like that. I've never heard anything quite like that before. So thank you very much, Daryl.
Thank you.
To everyone listening, keep fighting for yourself and don't stop because the pressure hits. I'm Massimo Rigatti. This is the Sober Method Podcast. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you know needs it. Remember, everyone, your future is sober.